Big Sister University Advice series. Today we're going to be talking about health. That's physical health, mental health, drugs and alcohol, sexual health, and staying safe. I'm Triya and I am a junior doctor working in London. Last year I graduated from the University of Oxford. In part 1 of this series I talked about adjusting to university life, friendships, studying and staying safe. So if you haven't seen that already, then check that out. Let's get into the video. So let's start by talking about physical health. So it is common for people to get sick when they come to university, and that is known as freshers' flu. This is where you get sick with the flu in the first couple of weeks of joining university. Now, unfortunately, this is very common for many reasons, but mainly because you're mixing with lots of different people and also the time of the year. It may seem like freshers' flu is unavoidable, but there are definitely things you can do to reduce your risk. So one of the most important things is washing your hands. I know it seems simple, but it's a really good way of reducing a risk of getting and transmitting infections. So definitely wash your hands after you sneeze and before you eat as well. This is also particularly important for vomiting and diarrhea bugs such as norovirus. Also, nowadays in a post-pandemic world, it's very acceptable for people to wear masks in public transport or when they're in really busy settings such as lecture theatres. So if you want to, you can wear a mask, and definitely if you're feeling sick, then it's useful to have masks around. If you do happen to get freshers' flu, then my advice is rest and recuperation. It's really important to have a stash of medicines in your room beforehand so you don't have to be trekking out to a pharmacy when you're sick. So the things I'd advise you keep with you are painkillers such as paracetamol or ibuprofen. Definitely have some Lemsip with you, and if you have any regular medicines such as inhalers, make sure you take them to university. If you catch a diarrhea and vomiting bug, then the best thing to do is to stay hydrated, so that's making sure to drink lots of water, or in some cases you can get oral rehydration solutions from pharmacies to make sure you're getting all the electrolytes that you need. If you are sick, then try to stay off until you're feeling better. Generally, when it comes to diarrhea and vomiting, we advise that you stay off for 48 hours after you've had your last episode of vomiting or diarrhea. When it comes to the flu, then try to stay off until you're feeling up to getting out and about again. So when you come to university, it's important to have a GP or a local doctor who you can go to in case you get sick. Lots of universities advise that you register with a local GP in the city that you're living in. Now, this is really useful in case you need some blood tests or you need a repeat prescription. However, if you're going to university in a town that is very close to home, then you might not need to actually switch your GP, because you'll find that this involves a lot of admin and paperwork and can take a lot of time to switch back and forth from when you're going home and when you are at university. So just think about that. There are, however, lots of different really good resources for health and people that you can talk to if you're feeling worried. Most universities will have an in-house doctor or nurse that you can talk to. Also, the NHS website is a really good resource for health advice. If you want to ring someone, you can ring the non-emergency hotline, which is 111, and then you can speak to an NHS practitioner who can give you some advice and direct you to the right services if necessary. For example, if they think that you need to see a GP in person or go to the hospital, then they can advise you to do so. In England, the emergency number is 999. That's who you can phone if you are having an emergency and you need to go to the hospital quickly. Generally, it's important to follow basic health advice just to make sure that you're staying healthy whilst you're in university. So that means things like exercising well and having a healthy, balanced diet. Now, this is easier said than done when you're a student and you're busy and money is tight, but if you have a college or university kitchen or canteen, then I would advise trying to go and get hot balanced meals whenever you can. There was definitely one day when I had ramen for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and although this was fun for one day, I don't recommend it in the long term. So the next thing I want to talk about is alcohol and drugs. So it may seem at university, especially in the UK, everyone is drinking alcohol. Now this isn't the case, although yes, it is true that many people do drink alcohol whilst they're in university. You don't have to drink at all at university if you don't want to. However, if you are going to drink alcohol, then it's best to do it safely and responsibly. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So generally, the advice is when it comes to drinking alcohol that adults shouldn't have any more than 14 units of alcohol per week. Now, 1 unit of alcohol is equivalent to 1 shot of a spirit, and 14 units of alcohol equates to roughly 1.5 bottles of wine per week, or 5 pints of lager. Now, the advice generally is to try not to have all of this alcohol in one sitting, which is known as binge drinking, but to try to spread it out and also have days where you don't have have any alcohol at all. This is to try to reduce the numerous bad effects of alcohol on your body. So my advice for drinking alcohol in uni is, especially if you haven't had much experience with drinking when you get to uni, is to try to take things slowly as you learn what your limit is. So generally, if you are planning to have drinks on a night out, then it's best to try to line your stomach beforehand, and by that I mean make sure that you have some food before you go out drinking. This will help you to feel less sick and also not get drunk as quickly. Remember that you don't have to drink if you don't want to, and you can go out partying and go to clubs without drinking alcohol and still have lots of fun. If you are worried about peer pressure, then just remember that a glass of Coca-Cola or Sprite looks exactly the same as a whiskey and coke or a gin and tonic. So no one has to know the difference apart from you. The best way to reduce your risk of getting a hangover and to avoid feeling really rubbish the next day is to make sure that you are really hydrated. Most bars will give you free tap water if you ask for it, so try to make sure that you're drinking water alongside drinking your alcohol. Keep a bottle of water by your bedside so that it's ready, waiting for you when you get home. My advice when it comes to taking drugs is don't ever, but if you have to take drugs, then make sure that you're doing it somewhere that you feel safe with people that you trust. If you end up getting sick or you're worried about a friend who's taken drugs and they're getting very sick, then please do go to the hospital. Don't try to avoid going because you're worried about getting caught with drugs. It's better to be safe and try to tell the doctors the truth about what drugs that you've taken, because doctors in the emergency department are very used to people taking drugs and will treat you without judgment. So the next thing I want to talk about is sexual health. I think it's important to start any conversation about sexual health with a reminder that consent and communication are key. So one thing that's really important to talk about when it comes to practicing safe sex is contraception. So barrier contraception, such as condoms or dental dams, are really important in order to reduce your risk of sexually transmitted infections and diseases such as chlamydia, syphilis and gonorrhea. So it's really good to be prepared and to make sure that you have some condoms with you. Lots of universities and sexual health clinics provide free condoms and contraception to people who ask for it, so definitely look into that. Remember that there are lots of other types of contraception, for example the coil, different types of pill, patches, injections and so forth, and a lot of those types of contraception are aimed at preventing pregnancy and also have lots of other hormonal uses that are not always related to contraception. But remember that barrier contraception is the way to reduce your risk of STIs. And being on another form of contraception alone, such as the pill, won't actually prevent you from getting STIs. If you are in a situation where you haven't used contraception or the contraception that you have used has somehow not worked, then you can get emergency contraception. One of the types, which is commonly known, is known as the morning after pill. Now this is a pill that contains a hormone called progesterone, and although it is not 100% effective, it can help you to reduce your risk of pregnancy after unprotected sex. Now there is more than one different type of emergency contraceptive pill, but most of them have to be taken within 72 hours of the unprotected sexual intercourse. But in general, how effective they are reduces as the time goes on. So if you are in need of emergency contraception, then try to get it as soon as possible and not wait to the end of that 72-hour window. Certainly all university towns will have a sexual health clinic in the locality, so it's really important if you are sexually active to make sure that you are getting tested for STIs every 3 to 6 months. And it is very fair to ask your partners to do the same. Now, I want to end talking about sexual health with a reminder about sexual assault and rape. And now, sadly, this can happen, but remember that if it does happen to you, then you're not alone. And I encourage you, if you can, to seek out advice. There are a lot of places that you can go for help. So for example, if your university dorm or accommodation has wardens, then these are people that you can go to initially for advice. Also, there are different organizations and charities that are set up to help people, such as Nightline or Rape Crisis Helplines, and I will link some in the description box so that you can have a look. So the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to health at university is mental health. So mental health and emotional well-being are really important, and everyone should make their mental health a priority. So university can be a very stressful time because not only are you having to deal with the academic pressures of your university, but also you are living independently and having to deal with friendship, cooking, money, and so many things all by yourself. Remember that you are not alone, and mental health problems, feeling lonely, feeling stressed is very common and happens to lots of people. It's totally okay, and there are lots of services and things you can do to get help. One thing that is important to remember is try not to put too much pressure on yourself to be perfect. Now, I know this is easier said than done, and it does take time to actually be able to do this. I know, for example, when I went to university, Oxford was a very academically pressured environment, which made academic pressure a huge stressor for most people's lives. This, in combination with the fact that most people who go to Oxford are perfectionists when it comes to studying, is a recipe for disaster when it comes to anxiety and stress about exams. But it's important to remember that no one is perfect and you don't have to achieve perfect grades in order to graduate and do everything that you want to do in life. In terms of keeping on top of your mental health, it's really important to prioritize your sleep and to make sure that you're getting a good amount of sleep every day. If you're feeling low, then there are ways that you can get help. Lots of universities have counselling services, and you can see your local GP or doctor if you are having these thoughts. Remember, you are not alone in feeling this way, and try to talk to someone, whether that be your friends, your doctors or your counsellors, that is someone who is willing to listen to you. And it's better to talk about these things early on, try to address the problems or have some reasonable adjustments before things get too overwhelming. But it's really important to try to make sure you have a balanced life where you're not just studying or you're not just partying, you're doing a range of different things. This will help you to be balanced and avoid getting burnt out. When I say burnout, I mean feelings of chronic stress and exhaustion, whether that be emotional or physical. This is often talked about in the context of work, but it can also be seen in students. Burnout involves feelings such as stress, exhaustion and anxiety, and a lack of interest in the work or the studying that would normally find interesting. You might be feeling helpless, cynical or overwhelmed. Now, burnout isn't something that can be resolved instantly because often it is related to a long-term build-up of stress, but it's really important to recognize the signs early on and to start talking about it with people so that you can prevent things from getting worse and you can try to readjust and balance your life so that you can try to resolve things. So I know I've talked about a lot of negative things, but actually university is a really fun experience and can be really rewarding. I think it's important to make sure that you are aware of things and empowered to look after your own health, whether that be physical or emotional. There are lots of really good resources online, so I'd advise you to look at those. If you're just starting university or you're going soon, then best of luck. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it was useful. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.